debt, your best friend or your worst nightmare?
Debt. For some, it is the silent killer of financial dreams. For others, it is the hidden weapon that multiplies wealth faster than years of saving ever could. The truth is simple. Debt is not just numbers, it is power. And like every kind of power, it can either build your empire or burn it to the ground. In this video, we are going to strip away the myths and expose the reality of debt. You will discover how to tell the difference between good debt and bad debt, how to use borrowing as a growth hack instead of a trap, and how to master the psychology of debt before it masters you. Most importantly, you will learn how to flip the nightmare of paying interest into the opportunity of earning it. If you want to escape financial stress and finally play the money game on your own terms, stay with us until the end, because missing even one part of this could cost you years of regret.
The double-edged sword. How debt can build or break you.
Debt is like a sword hanging on your wall. It looks shiny, powerful, and maybe even heroic. But here's the catch. If you know how to handle it, you can protect yourself, fight battles, and even win kingdoms. If you swing it around carelessly, you will probably chop off your own leg before you even step outside the door. Debt has the exact same personality. It is neither good nor bad by itself. It is simply a tool. The real problem is whether you use it wisely or let it destroy you. Think of debt as fire. Controlled fire makes your morning coffee, heats your house, and lets you eat a juicy steak instead of raw broccoli. Uncontrolled fire burns down your home, your future, and probably your eyebrows too. Debt can either be the spark that cooks your financial dinner, or the explosion that takes down your entire kitchen. The sword metaphor and the fire metaphor both point to the same truth. Debt has power, but that power is neutral. It is your choices that decide whether you are the hero or the fool in this story. Let us be brutally honest for a moment. Most people treat debt like a credit card-fueled shopping spree at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're bored, they're restless, and they think a new pair of sneakers or the latest gadget will magically cure their existential crisis. The problem is not the sneakers. The problem is the interest rate that will haunt them like a bad horror movie soundtrack for the next 5 years. This is debt at its worst. Money borrowed for things that lose value faster than your patience in a traffic jam. On the other hand, smart debt is the quiet, strategic cousin that everyone underestimates. It looks boring at first glance, but it is secretly brilliant. Imagine using debt to buy an asset that makes you more money than the cost of the loan. Well, that is not financial suicide. That is financial jujitsu. For example, using debt to invest in a business that generates income, or buying real estate that produces rent, can actually create wealth. It is like borrowing a sword not to wave around in the living room, but to win a battle that brings treasure back home. Here is the key difference. Bad debt takes money out of your pocket, while good debt puts money into your pocket. It is that simple, yet most people confuse the two. Buying a luxury car with a loan, that is bad debt. The car loses value the second you drive it off the lot, and now you owe the bank for something that is literally melting in value every day. Buying a delivery van with a loan that allows you to start a profitable small business, that is good debt. The van earns money, pays off the loan, and maybe even funds your next business idea. One debt sinks you. The other lifts you. Same sword, different swing. Of course, there is always the psychological side of debt. Carrying the wrong kind of debt feels like dragging a ball and chain around your ankle. Every bill, every late fee, every interest charge is like a reminder that you are losing the game. But carrying the right kind of debt feels more like wearing armor. It protects you, it gives you leverage, and it helps you move forward with confidence. The trick is to ask yourself a very simple question before you borrow. Will this debt make me richer or poorer in the long run? If the answer is richer, sharpen your sword and march ahead. If the answer is poorer, put the sword back on the wall and step away slowly. Now let us not sugarcoat this. Even good debt requires discipline. If you borrow recklessly, even for a smart investment, you can still crash and burn. Many people convince themselves they are using debt strategically, but in reality, they are just disguising bad habits with fancy excuses. The sword does not care about your intentions. It will cut you either way. Responsibility and self-awareness are the shields you must carry if you want to wield this weapon without losing a hand. So, the bottom line is clear. Debt is not your enemy, and it is not your best friend. It is a tool, a sword, a fire, a force. It can build you up, or it can break you down. If you respect it, study it, and use it wisely, it becomes your ally in creating wealth and opportunities. If you treat it casually, impulsively, or emotionally, it turns into your worst nightmare. The choice, as always, is yours. In the end, the smart person does not fear debt and does not worship it either. The smart person learns how to master it, because at the end of the day, the sword in your hand does not decide your fate. The way you swing it does.
Good debt versus bad debt. Spotting the angel and the devil.
Debt loves to wear costumes. Sometimes it shows up dressed like an angel, whispering sweet promises about building wealth, creating opportunities, and helping you climb the financial ladder. Other times it sneaks in wearing devil horns, tempting you with shiny toys, easy credit, and short-term thrills that quickly turn into long-term nightmares. The real challenge is learning to recognize which voice is speaking to you before you sign your name on the dotted line. Let us start with the angel. Good debt is like a mentor who gives you the tools to grow, but only if you do the work. Good debt does not shower you with gifts instantly. Instead, it creates leverage. For example, when you borrow money to invest in education, or business, or an income-producing asset, you are planting seeds that can grow into future wealth. The debt itself is not magical. What makes it good is that it has the potential to generate more money than it costs. The angel does not hand you success, but it gives you a ladder to climb. Now, let us meet the devil. Bad debt is seductive, loud, and impatient. It tells you that you deserve that new car, that exotic vacation, or that designer handbag right now. Forget patience, forget planning, just swipe the card and worry about it later. This is the voice that leads people into maxed out credit cards. It's endless payday loans and high interest purchases for things that lose value the moment they leave the store. The devil debt does not build your future. It mortgages your future. It steals from tomorrow so that you can enjoy a temporary rush today. The easiest way to tell them apart is to ask a single question. Does this debt put money in my pocket or take money out of my pocket? If it puts money in, it is wearing the angel costume. If it takes money out, it is the devil. Buying rental property that generates more rent than the mortgage. Angel, financing a television the size of a movie screen that will be outdated in 2 years. Devil, one is a financial ally. The other is a financial parasite. Of course, both angels and devils are tricky. The angel debt can still hurt you if you misuse it. For example, taking out a student loan for a valuable degree that increases your earning potential can be smart. But borrowing 6 figures to study something with no career path is like asking the angel for wings and then jumping off a cliff with no plan. On the flip side, not every piece of devil debt looks evil at first. That 0 interest for 12 months furniture loan sounds like a good deal until you miss a single payment, and suddenly, the interest rate jumps to something that makes your eyes water. Another way to spot the difference is in how the debt feels after the initial excitement wears off. Good debt feels like responsibility, maybe heavy, but it also feels purposeful, like carrying a backpack full of tools you will actually use. Bad debt feels like regret. At first it feels thrilling, but soon it feels like dragging a suitcase full of bricks up a hill with no end in sight. If you find yourself hiding bills, avoiding phone calls, or feeling a sense of dread every time you check your bank account, you probably shook hands with the devil without realizing it. Here's the funny part. Society often encourages people to love bad debt. Advertisements scream you deserve it. Banks hand out credit cards like candy on Halloween. Car dealerships make you believe you are successful only if you drive a brand new luxury vehicle, even if your wallet is running on fumes. Meanwhile, nobody teaches how to actually use good debt. Schools rarely explain leverage. Parents warn children to avoid debt entirely, which is like telling someone to avoid fire forever instead of teaching them how to cook with it. So what is the solution? It is awareness and discipline. Listen carefully to the voice of the debt in front of you. Is it promising instant gratification or long-term growth? Is it feeding your ego or feeding your wallet? Is it pushing you to look rich or helping you actually become rich? When you strip away the costumes, the angel and the devil are easy to recognize. One makes you stronger over time. The other drains you until you are weaker than when you started. In the end, debt will always be part of life, Pretending that you can avoid it completely is unrealistic for most people. The real secret is not to fear debt, but to master it. Welcome the angel into your financial plan when it can truly create opportunities. Slam the door on the devil when it tries to seduce you with false promises. Never forget. Both are knocking on your door every single day. The decision of which one you let in determines whether debt becomes your partner in growth or your ticket to financial ruin.
When borrowing becomes a growth hack instead of a trap.
Borrowing money has a bad reputation. People imagine endless bills, ruthless banks, and debt collectors knocking at the door. But borrowing itself is not the villain. The truth is that borrowing can either be a trap that slowly strangles your financial future, or it can be a growth hack that accelerates you toward opportunities you would never reach on your own. The difference comes down to how you use it, why you use it, and whether you understand the rules of the game. Think about it like a video game. In every game, there are power-ups that make your character stronger, faster, and smarter. But if you use them recklessly, you waste them and lose the round. Borrowing money is the financial version of a power-up. If you borrow with a plan, you level up. If you borrow without discipline, you hit game over faster than you can say interest rate. The trap side of borrowing is obvious. You borrow money to buy things that do not make money. The debt grows, the interest piles up, and suddenly you are working harder just to keep your head above water. It is like digging a hole and then renting a ladder to climb out of it, except the ladder costs more than the hole was worth in the first place. This is what happens when people treat borrowing as a shortcut to pleasure instead of a strategy for progress. Now let us flip the coin. Borrowing can also be a growth hack if you treat it as leverage instead of liability. Imagine you want to start a business. You have the skills, the idea, and the passion, but you lack the resources. Strategic borrowing can give you the tools, equipment, or space to launch that business and start generating cash flow. The borrowed money is not just debt. It is fuel for your engine. If the business earns more than the cost of borrowing, then congratulations, you hacked the system. You used borrowed money to create new money. The same principle applies to real estate. Many wealthy individuals did not get rich by slowly saving pennies in a jar. They borrowed money to buy properties that produced rental income. The rent paid off the loan, the property increased in value, and the debt that once looked scary became the bridge to wealth. Was there risk? Absolutely. But risk combined with strategy is very different from risk combined with impulse. The trick is knowing when borrowing is a tool and when it is a trap. Here is a simple test. If the borrowing will create future income or increase your net worth, it has the potential to be a growth hack. If the borrowing is for something that loses value immediately, it is probably a trap. Financing a truck for your delivery business. Growth hack. Financing a luxury vacation you cannot afford. Trap. One moves you forward, the other drags you backward. But let us be clear. Not every attempt at using borrowing as a growth hack works. Plenty of people start businesses with borrowed money and fail. Plenty of real estate investors miscalculate and end up drowning in payments. Borrowing is never risk-free, but neither is playing it safe. Sometimes the biggest risk is refusing to take any risk at all. The point is not to avoid borrowing entirely. The point is to borrow with intention, preparation, and a plan for profit. Here is the funny part. People who treat borrowing as a trap often end up trapped by their own fear. They refuse to borrow even for opportunities that could multiply their money, so they stay stuck in the same financial place for years. Meanwhile, people who borrow wisely are out there building businesses, buying assets, and creating wealth. It is not about luck. It is about perspective. One group sees borrowing as poison. The other sees it as medicine when used in the right dose. Psychologically, borrowing for growth feels very different than borrowing for consumption. When you borrow for consumption, you feel guilty, stressed, and regretful. Every bill is a reminder that you borrowed for something that is already gone. When you borrow for growth, you feel motivated and focused. Debt becomes a reason to work harder, to push smarter, and to stay disciplined. Instead of regret, you feel responsibility. Responsibility is far healthier than guilt. So, how do you make borrowing your growth hack instead of your trap? Start with education. Understand interest rates, repayment terms, and the real cost of debt. Then build a plan where the borrowed money has a clear path to generating more money than it costs. Finally, keep your ego out of the decision. Borrowing to look rich is a trap. Borrowing to become rich can be a hack. At the end of the day, borrowing is neutral. It is not good or bad until you decide how to use it. If you treat it like free money, it will trap you. If you treat it like a tool, it can hack your growth and open doors you never thought possible. The difference between the two is not luck or fate. The difference is discipline.
The psychology of debt. Master the game before it masters you.
Debt is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet or balances on a credit card. Debt is also about psychology. It creeps into your emotions, your confidence, and even the way you see yourself. For many people, debt is not only financial, it is mental. That is why some individuals stay stuck in destructive cycles, while others use debt strategically to build wealth. It is not just about math. It is about mindset. First, let us talk about fear. Debt can feel like a monster under your bed. You try to ignore it, but you know it is there, waiting to jump out when you least expect it. This fear makes people avoid opening bills, delay checking their accounts, and pretend everything is fine. But fear does not solve anything. The monster gets bigger every day you ignore it. The psychology of debt starts with this truth. What you fear will eventually control you unless you face it head on. Then there is guilt. Borrowing money for things that do not help your future creates a shadow that follows you everywhere. Every monthly payment is like a reminder that you traded tomorrow for a quick thrill yesterday. Guilt makes people feel powerless, ashamed, and stuck. Ironically, this shame often leads to more bad decisions. People think, I am already in debt, so one more purchase will not matter. That thought is exactly how the trap tightens. Now let us flip to the other side of psychology. Debt can also fuel ambition. When used correctly, it becomes a motivator. Imagine borrowing money to launch a business. That loan is not just a liability. It is also a reminder that you must focus, work, and deliver results. Instead of dragging you down, it pushes you forward. The psychology shifts from guilt to responsibility. Responsibility is heavy, but it is also empowering. It makes you sharper, more disciplined, and more determined. The real danger is when you let debt play the game while you just react. Credit card companies, lenders, and banks are experts at psychology. They design systems that encourage impulsive decisions. They make it easy to borrow, but painful to repay. By now, pay later is not just a slogan, it is a psychological trick. It tells your brain that the pain of paying is far away, while the pleasure of buying is immediate. That is how debt masters you, by making you chase instant gratification while burying you in long-term costs. To master the game, you must flip the script. Instead of reacting to debt, you must control the rules of engagement. Start by asking yourself why you are borrowing in the first place. Is it for validation? For comfort? For convenience? Or is it for growth, opportunity, and leverage? So, understanding your psychological triggers is the first step in mastering the game. If you borrow out of impulse, the game owns you. If you borrow with intention, you own the game. Here is a practical example. Two people borrow the same amount of money. One uses it to buy a car they cannot afford just to impress strangers who do not care. The other uses it to buy equipment for a side hustle that generates extra income. Same amount, same interest rate, completely different psychological outcome. One is enslaved to the debt, constantly stressed about payments. The other is empowered by the debt, motivated to grow beyond it. The math is the same, but the mindset makes all the difference. Debt psychology also connects deeply with identity. Some people see debt as a symbol of failure. Others see it as a tool of empowerment. If you believe debt makes you weak, you will always feel trapped. If you believe debt can be mastered, you will treat it like a resource instead of a curse. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. Debt is dangerous, but it is also powerful. The way you think about it shapes the way you use it. So how do you master the game before it masters you? Step 1 is awareness. Recognize the emotions debt triggers in your fear, guilt, excitement, or ambition. Step 2 is discipline. Never let emotions alone decide your financial moves. Create rules for yourself, only borrow for assets, never for vanity, always with a repayment plan. Step 3 is strategy. Treat debt like a chess piece, not like a toy. Position it where it creates advantage, not chaos. The final step is to remember that debt is a game designed by institutions that profit when you lose. The banks want you to pay interest forever. Credit card companies want you to stay trapped in minimum payments. They are the house, and the house always wins, unless you learn how to play smarter than they expect. Mastering the psychology of debt means staying aware of the tricks, resisting the emotional traps, and choosing logic over impulse. At the end of the day, debt will either play you like a fool or push you to level up. It all depends on whether you let emotions control your decisions or whether you use discipline to control your emotions. Debt is not just math. Debt is mindset. If you master the psychology, you master the game. And once you master the game, you stop being a pawn on the board and start moving like the player who controls the pieces.
Turning interest payments into investments, not nightmares.
Interest is like gravity. It is always there, quietly pulling on your money. The question is whether it drags you down into a financial nightmare, or whether you learn to harness it like rocket fuel for your financial growth. Most people see interest only as a punishment, a cruel tax for borrowing. But the truth is that interest can either crush you or pay you, depending on which side of the equation you are standing on. The secret is to flip the script. Stop feeding the nightmare and start investing so that interest works for you, not against you. Let us start with the nightmare scenario. You borrow money for something that does not create value. Maybe it is a flashy car, a weekend vacation, or that brand new phone you just had to have. The excitement fades quickly, but the interest does not. It sticks around, quietly multiplying your debt like rabbits in the spring. Suddenly, that $2,000 purchase costs $3,500 after years of interest payments. You are paying more for something that is worth less. That is not a financial decision. It is financial self-sabotage dressed up as convenience. Now imagine the opposite. Instead of pouring money into interest payments that only benefit the bank, you channel that same money into investments. Every dollar you invest starts working for you, creating more dollars. That is compound interest in action. Instead of paying the bank forever, you become the bank. You earn returns on your money, and those returns start to earn their own returns. The same force that once buried you now builds you. The psychology here is fascinating. People hate paying interest but love earning it. The problem is that most people never make the transition. They stay stuck in the cycle of feeding the nightmare, borrowing for consumption, paying high interest, and wondering why they feel trapped. The solution is not complicated, but it does require discipline. Step 1. Stop borrowing for things that lose value. Step 2. Redirect that energy into building assets that grow. It is simple, but it is not easy, because it requires saying no to instant gratification and yes to long-term reward. Let us look at an example. Suppose you are paying $300 every month in credit card interest. That is $3,600 a year, vanishing into thin air, benefiting nobody except the credit card company. Now imagine redirecting that same $300 into an investment account, earning a modest 8% annual return. This is why wealthy people think differently about interest. They rarely waste time paying interest on consumer debt. Instead, they focus on using borrowed money strategically and then making interest their ally. They let investments, businesses, and real estate generate returns that outpace the cost of borrowing. Meanwhile, the average person is busy working extra hours just to pay off the interest on last year's vacation. Same financial tool, completely different outcomes. Turning interest into an investment is not just about big moves like real estate or stock portfolios. It can start small. Every time you avoid paying unnecessary interest, you create an opportunity to redirect that money towards something productive. Paying off a high-interest debt is itself an investment, because the money you save on interest is money you can put to work elsewhere. Think of it like patching a hole in your wallet before trying to fill it. First, stop the leak. Then, let your money grow. Of course, this requires patience. The nightmare of paying interest feeds on impatience. It whispers, buy now, pay later. The investment path, on the other hand, whispers, save now, build later. The irony is that one path feels easier in the moment, but harder in the long run. The other feels harder in the moment, but much easier in the long run. It is delayed gratification versus instant regret.
Oh.
So how do you make the switch? Start by attacking the worst interest payments first. Credit cards, payday loans, and personal loans with ridiculous rates are financial vampires sucking the life out of your money. Pay them off aggressively. Next, create a habit of investing the same amount you were once throwing into interest. Turn that former nightmare into a new growth engine. Finally, educate yourself about compound interest and investment strategies, because the more you understand, the easier it is to stay disciplined. At the end of the day, interest is not good or bad. It is simply a force. It can either be the chains that keep you tied to financial stress, or it can be the wind that lifts your sails toward wealth. If you keep paying it blindly, it will always feel like a nightmare. If you flip the script and start earning it, interest becomes the most powerful ally in your financial journey. The choice is simple. Will you keep feeding the banks, or will you finally let interest work for you?
The choice is yours.
Debt is not your enemy, and it is not your savior. It is a force, neutral and powerful, waiting for you to decide how it will shape your future. You have seen how it can be an angel or a devil, a trap or a growth hack, a nightmare or an investment. The difference has nothing to do with luck, and everything to do with awareness, discipline, and mindset. The next time you face a decision about debt, remember what you have learned here. Will you let it control you, feeding banks and burying your future? Or will you master it, using it as leverage to build wealth and freedom? The knowledge is now in your hands. Use it wisely, and debt will stop being the chain that holds you back and become the tool that propels you forward. The choice, as always, is yours.